On today's episode, we welcome Mark O'Keefe, founder of Portunous Tech. Mark, welcome.
Thanks, Max. Great to be here.
There you go. So how did you start Portunous and why did you want to start that business?
I mean, for me, I've been in the industry about 25 years now, and Endpoint and its surrounding technologies have always been my passion. That's where I've been focused more or less the entirety of my career.
Hmm.
And then the one thing that really captured me about it was it's essentially impacting every user's day-to-day productivity, their ability to work and drive value in the organization, regardless of industry. So the last 12 years or so, I was working for one of the major consulting firms. And in doing that, ton of exposure to Fortune 500 companies, again, across every industry.
Mhm.
And that cumulative experience really showed me recurring challenges. And it felt like there was a gap in the industry for dedicated thought leadership in this space in particular.
Okay.
I've heard for years that Endpoint was going away. And as people, they chased cloud trends, they chased information security trends, they chased collaboration trends, and now it's AI, right? It's always what's hot at the moment. And what's left in that wake is this very crucial, still relevant, still evolving space that's increasingly underserved. So I wanted to take all of that experience that I have in all those years and kind of bring some of that into the industry as far as a dedicated player on those technologies.
Okay. And would you say it's like a consultant business towards the endpoint side, or what kind of business is it?
Yeah, I mean that's it's funny if you asked me that question 3 months ago, I might have had a different answer. When I first left the previous consulting firm, that was kind of my focus was to
Mhm.
continue doing that, but just be a niche player in these technologies. But over the past number of months, I've kind of had a bit of a vision of wanting to see something that's less reliant on to what I just said, right? This part of the industry is very underserved. And
Mhm.
when you're talking about even from an education perspective, certification perspective,
Mhm.
there's such a diminished demand for those folks over the past number of 5 to 10 years
Mhm.
that there's a lot less people to do the work. A lot of the people out there working for these companies now have been doing it for years, but there's a significant gap that at some point some of these people are going to retire, leave the industry, do whatever they do,
Mhm.
and the need to do more with less, which is something even Microsoft has had in their kind of slogans for the past couple of years, that's becoming more and more relevant.
Mhm.
So I've shifted to still doing consulting, still looking to do managed services where it's suitable for clients, but
Okay.
my kind of passion project and focus point with the company right now is actually creating a product that can really do that scale
Mhm.
of expertise without needing multiple pairs of hands to do some of these initiatives.
Nice. And talking about maybe pairs of hands, like what's your role in that business as like the CEO? Are you still like just a consultant or maybe a bit of a tech guy into the business? Like what's your
Yeah,
in your business
I
as
mean, I've always done a bit of everything
yeah.
throughout my career, and that's part of what also gave me kind of the confidence to be able to pursue this because it's a very different animal than just technical or just consulting
Mhm.
or any part of it. I mean, right now, a lot of it, again, being focused on that product is the architecting, the engineering, and the evolution of that through its iterations.
Okay.
But everything from marketing to finance to consulting to essentially all the hats right now.
So you basically had to know the service and then add all the business side onto it and then learn
Yeah.
everything all as a one package, basically.
Yeah, I've been fortunate that in previous roles I've had, they were technical plus. It was technical plus
Okay.
engineering, technical plus go to market, technical plus solutioning and architecting. So I've been lucky enough to have exposure to all of those things and be able to, again, this is really the culmination of kind of my entire career.
Hmm. And I think you just talk about the endpoint, the AI, all that like shift that always
Yep.
change every, let's say, 3 years, maybe even less now. So what are the like major changes do you think the organization like still misunderstand from all of those tech changes, basically?
I mean, I think the AI trend is one of the more fascinating ones because it's one of the ones where I've seen a lot less I don't want to say gullibility, but people are a lot more skeptical of the trend and identifying it as a trend, calling it a trend.
Mm,
Um, I think there's still the organizations that were selling it, whether you're talking the AI companies themselves or the consulting firms. That first year on the market, there was a lot of FOMO marketing, right? Oh,
mhm.
your competitors are doing it. How are you not doing it?
Yeah.
And there was really this mentality of if you're not first, you're last to
Mhm,
adopt, and if you're last, you're losing. Even if
mhm,
there was no problem to solve, there was this ethos of AI was going to change everything, solve everything, and flip everything on its head. And as these organizations have adopted it, as they've tried to, I think the most interesting use case were the ones who were like, you know what, we're an industry leader, we're going to be first to this, and we're going to figure out where it applies.
mhm,
Seeing them struggle to find problems to solve with it was one of the really ironic parts of it. Is you got there, you adopted it, but
mhm.
that value wasn't there because you didn't have a problem to solve necessarily to begin with, or at least a problem suitable for AI to solve.
Hmm. And do you have any example of those kind of like tests they did with those implementation? Like,
I mean, it's funny too because when you talk AI, you could be talking four different things at this point. It's very much like when cloud was evolving from it was just a get out of the data center into this various permeations of it.
mhm.
There's the general purpose generative AI. Microsoft's got their Copilot, you got Claude, you got ChatGPT, you've got all those.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, there was a lot of gung ho adoption of that. And what they saw was like, this is fantastic for taking notes of my meetings, but there wasn't a ton of intrinsic value beyond it for the entire workforce.
Mm,
And it was when you started to, again, work with what you would have pre AI, your citizen developers, your business champions, and say, hey, we've got a cool capability. What
mhm,
can we do with it? That's when you started to see organizations in certain industries drive out these very unique, valuable use cases. I mean, I think the one that I really loved was virtual rounding in healthcare
mm,
and leveraging AI for things in that space to help with intake and things along those lines because that's it's valuable, it's efficient, and it's impacting everybody who's then consuming that service. That was a very good use of the tool and finding a place where its efficiency was very measurable and tangible. But the agentic AI, the custom AIs, that's where organizations with the right level of maturity are saying, okay, we know what it takes to do this effectively when it comes to data and cleanliness and just data structure, which is usually the biggest underpinning of failing of AI initiatives.
mhm,
We've got the data to support this. We understand the workflow well enough to know where it is suitable to inject,
mhm.
and then now let's see how we can solve the problem with it as part of a larger ecosystem or a suite of things that
Mm.
are addressing a challenge.
And you just talked about like customized AI. Is that like just uh private LLMs or what is a customized AI for those kind of business?
Private LLMs, or I mean, even if you're not training a whole LLM, the agentic AIs or the ones where you're creating. I mean, again, I'm very Microsoft centric myself, so
Mhm.
the custom copilots. So
Okay.
even where you're just saying, hey, here's an internal repository of authoritative data.
Hmm.
Go look at this, scan this, and just it being able to pull in that data and be able to even just answer questions and find that for people because
Hmm.
depending on the size of the organization, sometimes just finding what is relevant amongst the aging documentation that's had so many permeations, that in itself is valuable and can provide efficiency.
Hmm.
But when you have it set for a particular focus and you start to train it on, one of the things that I always loved the idea of as a solution architect for a consulting company was we've done this solution 80
Mhm.
times for 80 different companies. There are consistencies and
Mhm.
there are regular variances. Can we start to do modeling on it? Can we train something to identify these things? And even if it's just a hand in hand with a human architect to say, hey, have you considered? We've seen this 12% of the time. We've seen this 18% of the time. This kind of staffing was included. This kind of cost was included or expense.
Mhm.
Those types of things, just again, that's where you're getting that it's helping bring some of the data and some of the knowledge to individuals that might not have been exposed to it, and it is becoming that aggregator that is where it can be extremely valuable.
Hmm. And talking about all that subjects, I think we talked about on our pre-podcast call that you're actually using a customizable AI on your business.
Yep.
How was that going? How was that came to your mind? Was it a
Uh,
problem with that?
yeah, that was. I mean, I've been a very speaking of skeptics of AI. I'm a very pragmatic person when it comes to solutions and trends and all of that. So
Mhm.
when all of this hype started, my challenge back to a lot of my peers was show me, right? Show me it providing the value that we're saying it provides. Show me it augmenting these workflows, reducing the time by 30, 40, 50%,
Mhm.
or, increasing the time to value for certain tasks.
Mhm.
And I think one of the funniest industry commentaries was, oh, it's going to kill consulting,
Hmm.
which on one hand, I made the same face you just did. On the other hand, I understand there's not that's not completely unfounded because you do have there's a in the large consultant firms there's this mentality of we're going to take a really smart I'll say kid but a new graduate as a
Mhm.
junior associate, bring them in and we're just going to teach them what they need to know.
Mhm.
But then you have these running jokes of, I've got a 24-year-old new grad that's being brought into one of the biggest banks in North America as an expert. They're not. So that that's where the AI could significantly impact and change the perception of consulting because it is those or it is the equivalent of that tribal knowledge consolidated.
Mhm.
So in that sense, it's very impactful to the consulting industry. But I kind of hearing that it's going to kill consulting, I kind of looked at that as a challenge accepted, to challenge myself as well. Of I've been maybe a little stubborn in wanting to adopt it or integrate it. Let's see what it's really capable of, and again, take a very pragmatic and technical approach to it.
Mhm.
What can this thing do, and where in my workflow could this make sense?
Mhm.
And when I looked at what I wanted to build, the vision I had, something that was, starting from what was effectively a brainchild of mine, which is a scoring rubric around endpoint um, maturity,
Mhm.
which you've got those for security, you've got those for a lot of other spaces, but endpoint, even being very adjacent to security, still didn't get the same level of attention crossing things like security and collaboration and productivity and management and the asset layer, because that's another key part of when you're talking about how people work in the modern workplace for endpoint. The devices are key.
Mhm.
Um, so having that become part of the workflow after I had a scoring rubric, being able to train it on it, interpret values that are being discovered through scripts and automation, and being able to contextualize those amongst one another. That's where I took the consultant in a box approach. Like if it was me receiving these results, these scores across all of these different factors, these different controls and different silos, how would I interpret them individually? How would I interpret them within the silo? But how would I interpret them also across the silos?
Mhm.
And then going through a training, repeated training exercises and evolution with the model to really get it doing that. That's where again it was a kind of challenge accepted. Let's try and create a consultant in a box. Let's brain
Mhm.
dump as much as I can with it to see how close it can be to an expert, a true expert.
Hmm. And what did you discover from the results of that AI consultant? Did you see him like hallucinate answers or bring up like weird data that doesn't really make sense? Or
There was definitely, I mean, it's an evolution for
yeah.
sure. I
Mhm.
was surprised in a positive way at
Yeah.
the first iterations through.
Hmm.
Then when it got into more nuanced scenarios where the complexity increases,
Hmm.
that's when I did see you'd see a hard veer left or a hard veer right, right? It would kind of get stuck in its own. I believe this is authoritative.
Hmm.
And that's where, there's a lot of conversations happening right now about how much do you need to poison the well, right? If you had 10,000 documents, 100 could create those kind of hallucinations or just bad
Mhm.
perceptions.
Yeah.
So that's where, for me, part of my own learning journey with it was its learning journey and how to iterate with it and feed it back authoritative sources of no, what are the other options? Actually, that tends to be preferable because, and having that back and forth with it almost, I found the success I've had with it was treating it like a junior consultant, treating it like a new graduate who's entering consulting. And
Mm-hmm.
it has a lot of empirical knowledge, like a book learning knowledge, but it doesn't have context. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have experience.
Yeah.
And having that kind of transaction with it was where I saw really interesting kind of growth and evolution with it.
Hmm. And did you think all that experience with that new AI kind of change your mind into it's overhyped, or do you still think it's kind of overhyped for businesses? Where's your mindset towards that?
I still think I mean, it's hard to say it's not overhyped because it's all anybody talks about ever
Yeah.
in in most venues nowadays.
Yeah.
But it's not that it's not valuable. It's really about understanding. I think one of the best, and I apologize, I can't remember the source, but there was someone speaking on it, and they equated it to a utility like electricity, right? And how did that change, say, a barber around the turn of the century? They went from having, lit candles and using scissors and a comb to having lights and a buzzer, but still scissors and a comb,
Hmm.
right? So I think the narrative I would change about AI is the breadth of what it will impact is yes, everything. Everything's going to be impacted directly or indirectly in some way, shape, or form.
Hmm.
But it's not transformative top to bottom on everything that we know and everything that we're doing, right? These processes still exist. These things won't fundamentally change necessarily, or at least not for a full generation of this.
Hmm.
That's where I find the agentic AI conversation so interesting because it's acknowledging from an application perspective, having AI talk to an application backend, that's effectively you need an API.
Yeah.
And the software developers haven't created that yet for an agent to interact directly with a backend. So instead, you have an agentic AI acting like a human, doing human tasks through a GUI interface that a person would normally use.
Hmm.
So we've already got this bridge solution of agentic AI where it will take the place of a human and act like a human, leveraging the software as it exists. But as time evolves, they will find ways for an AI backend to talk to an application backend. And then it's all just essentially, data center processing.
Hmm. But would there be a subjects where business should probably put more of their concern over AI? Because usually business will just come in and be like, AI is the big word right now. That's what we want. That's what we need. Is there something like they should probably focus on first before going into wanting implementing AI? So what are those other
Yeah.
subjects?
I mean, one, identify the problem. What
Yeah.
is the problem? And again, is this even a solution?
Mm.
Right? If the problem is, well, we keep having security flaws because we're not doing baselining. It's like, well, AI could contribute to that solution, but it's probably overkill as well.
Hmm.
There are existing solutions that are much leaner, more mature,
Mm.
and very sophisticated to do that are probably a lot less effort to implement.
Hmm.
So identifying a problem and ensuring that it's the right tool for the problem is a big thing. And second, I mean, again, you see it now in the industry. The narrative is data. If your data is not right, if you feed in bad, you get out bad is kind of the mantra. So unless you have a good understanding of your data, and again, it doesn't mean that your data is perfect because again, I've worked for a lot of Fortune 500 organizations. None of them have perfect data, but
Hmm.
it's about understanding how good your data is, where it is reliable, where it's less reliable, and being able to integrate that into your understanding of what you're going to feed it so that you're getting the right results. Because if you feed it something that is mixed quality and you're expecting perfect quality out, that's where it's not intelligent enough to do that. It doesn't have that subjectivity. It doesn't have that tribal knowledge of your organization even
Hmm.
to be able to parse through those things. It's all just data. So good data and bad data is where the human factor is still so crucial in preparing for any kind of AI implementation.
And have you seen two example where data was good versus bad and what the AI did on both of those cases?
I mean, I've even pre AI, a
Okay.
lot of my focal point for say the past 10 years has been Windows migrations. right? That's a massive scale. Windows is going out of support. We need to get these tens of thousands of devices moved over in a relatively short time span, usually, to
Hmm.
reduce the impact of the users and support. And all of that, when you're talking potential hardware replacements, coordinations of companies that are across the country or multinational or even global, the
Hmm.
logistics to do a lot of that, there's a lot of data that goes into it.
Hmm.
And you have so many data sources that are, it's like a really big Venn diagram. You know, a lot of things will have the machine's name, they'll have the user's name, they'll have an email, and you're trying to stitch all of them together in a way that you're creating a comprehensive record that you can action reliably. So having, even again, pre AI, having that kind of data and being able to, with a degree of confidence, start to action it on a macro level was the difference between some really great projects and some really painful ones. And AI is, it's just, again, if you put it in a worker role,
Hmm.
it's going to action it the same way a junior employee would.
Hmm.
And it's not going to have the experience to identify good versus bad. It's just going to action it. So the the risk is always, where I guide people is, if someone just pressed the button and wasn't thinking, what's the worst thing that will happen? Right? How exposed are you from a bad action?
Yeah. Really, that's not even good to think about because it's like you talk like cybersecurity guys and it's like the human is the one that can break up everything. And then if you have just an AI that just accept everything, it's like he received an email and just click on something he's not supposed to do and
Yeah.
just boom, here goes your industry or your systems. So that's not
Yeah.
something you really want to talk about. Um,
Even specific to, the example I was using of Windows migrations, when you're shipping a new laptop to somebody, for example,
mhm.
if you send it to the wrong address, you now have an asset worth hundreds of dollars sitting on someone else. With the hybrid work and everything since COVID, you now have a new laptop sitting on the neighbor's porch that they don't know why they got a free laptop, but they'll take it.
Yeah, for sure.
So this is where, how bad can bad be? Can When you're talking a macro process like that and something that's automated running unchecked, that's where you start to really understand the breadth of how bad can be with
Hmm.
these processes.
Absolutely. So coming back to your business, what's working well for it right now as of client outcomes, maybe service delivery? What does it look like, the kind of business you're doing right now?
Yeah, I mean, I've been engaging with clients and got some really great connections from my former life. So
Mhm.
continuing to, pursue work with them and really try to get established, because that's where hitting the market as a much smaller niche player off of essentially my name value, it's challenging, because as much as I may have worked with folks in the past, the brand that I was under was doing heavy lifting there as well. So now it's trying to show them that, show customers, both ones I've worked with and ones I haven't, what this looks like, what the vision of this is, and how qualified, my organization is to do it. And the folks that I'm bringing in are all very, vetted and aligned with me on being hyper focused and passionate about this space.
Mm.
And then converting that into, again, whether it is consulting, whether it is a managed service, or whether it's this product,
Mm.
um, all of these years of experience are being poured into this. And at the end of the day, I've said it for years to folks that I was mentoring and training, and all anybody wants to do at the end of the day is good work, right? To be compensated for it, but to do good work and feel great about, especially in consulting, great about delivering outcomes for customers.
Mhm.
So when you can do that authentically, that's and do it with something you're passionate about, that's kind of the dream, right?
So the challenge will be, because that was like the next question, was the challenge of the business. I think you talked a little bit about it, where it's like bringing your vision to those people and then finding maybe those people. So what are the challenges right now for the kind of business you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, identifying, again, I've got a number of folks I know from
Yeah.
just my time in the industry.
Yeah.
But identifying new customers is always challenging, because people are getting, I myself, prior to moving out, I was getting those emails in my inbox that I just deleted without really reading, because I wasn't in the market for a tool or this or that. So knowing that you're just competing for attention and airspace in an already saturated market is a challenge.
Yeah.
especially when, again, there's not a name value there yet. You don't have that established foothold to be able to say, look at all the things we've done, right? I can say, look at the things that I've done,
Hmm.
um, but that's not the organization. So bringing those successes into the organization, being able to really tout it under that banner is one of the big hurdles to get over. And yeah, just getting it's one of those interesting things where once I connect with someone, I've got the opportunity to really talk it through with them. If they've got a problem that's suitable for me to solve, I have no doubt that we can, do some work together. It's
Hmm.
really about, do they have this challenge? Do they have the support to solve the problem as well? Because that's always, again, when you're talking, I mean, not just Fortune 500, but any organization really, endpoint is so, this is the one kind of bugaboo about the space. It's often seen as set it and forget it, right? Oh, unless the machine's broken, it's fine.
Hmm.
Where it's, a lot of organizations don't have the mechanisms to understand how much value they're leaving on the table
Hmm.
with, poorly configured machines,
Hmm.
poorly configured management, underserviced things that should have been evergreen 2 years ago, the risk because they're going to just die. All of these different things that factor into, this is the window for your productivity, right? The device. And if it's not set to work with you anytime, anywhere, efficiently with what you need it to do, how much money are you leaving on the table, right? If you even consider an individual's salary, if 10% of your people are losing 10% of their productivity a year,
Hmm.
what's 10% of their salary, right? It grows so exponentially in dollar value so quickly when you realize how macro the
Hmm.
device layer is.
And how do you pass that message over where the budget, the ROI? Because I think that's one of like the main subjects of the IT businesses is like other businesses don't see the value of the IT
Yep.
service that gets offered. So MSP, cybersecurity, it's always like, why would I pay this amount for something that it might just happen if, or there's no like real data or any backup for
Right.
people to understand. So how do you angle that so that those business understand that part of the ROI or the budget?
Yeah. I think the people who are, the folks you'll more often engage with first, the folks I'll end up talking with first are directors, managers, senior managers in this space. So they do understand it. They know, right? And it's been their pain point. They haven't been able to get budget for something approved for the past 2 years.
Mm.
So working with them, it's, look, I've got case studies that I can reference and experience that I've personally done and seen the outputs of it that I can speak to.
Nice.
More often than not, though, it's nobody wants to hear a story. Because anybody, like, you could make up a story in reality, right? I could say I did a 500,000 seat organization and it cut it down from 20 hours to provision device to two.
Hmm.
There's no way to really validate that, right?
Hmm.
That's why a named reference in the industry is so impactful, because if someone, a customer willing to say, yes, that was us. Yes, we experienced that. It was awesome, right? That's so phenomenal.
Hmm.
Um, but where the consulting approach is very much, look, I can tell you stories and I can, speak from my experience,
Hmm.
but the best thing we can do is a really quick assessment that I can show you,
Yeah.
right? I can look at your data, your environment, your devices, and show you the math on, hey, you've got 20 things that I could recommend that you could do, but this one, I can promise you this is going to save you this many hours
Hmm.
minimum, right? And that's the biggest thing about that also, and it's a personal philosophy of mine, is not to inflate those numbers, not to, I notoriously, there's a calculator from a very well-known company that calculates efficiencies that you're going to realize when you do a thing, and it's got so many assumptions baked into it that so few customers ever realize that.
Hmm.
To say that, hey, look, this is the ceiling of what you can save,
Hmm.
sure, let's talk about the art of the possible. That's cool, but let's talk about what's more realistic. If you do
Hmm.
these one, two, three things we've seen frequently, it does at least this
Hmm.
performance increase. Let's measure that, because that's going to determine if you can prove that ROI over a year, then you should invest in it this year, and then you're saving it from that point forward, right? So
Hmm.
that real, genuine, authentic, I want to help you save money, because again, that's a win for everybody. Nobody loses in that case. You just are performing better. You're having things work better.
Mhm.
Being able to show the math, do the assessment, and produce that to both the stakeholder and their leadership,
Mhm.
that's when you start to see this realization of, maybe this is worth the investment.
Hmm. I do like this idea of like not inflating those numbers because sometimes a lot of time you'll see people be like, oh, if we do this and then we make, let's say, 200 a month more, but the realistic price is more 75 a month.
Yeah,
Why don't you just calculate it at 75 a month, be realistic with the price and the time and all the calculation, and just put the minimum of this is what we need to it and not the, oh, if it goes with all the wind in the back, we'll do 300 a month and then we'll do this big number. But that's
yeah,
just not irrealistic, but it's like if all the thing are together, then we'll
yeah,
reach this instead of just this is the real thing we are aiming for.
yeah.
So is
Well,
those is oh, do you want to go?
no, I was just say it's the difference of probable and possible, right? And both are relevant, but probable is what you budget off of.
Absolutely. And it's like, do, because you said you go in their business, you ask those questions. Sorry for that. You ask those questions and you basically help them understand and look at their data. Is that something, a lead magnet that we call? Does that bring people in to actually go and tell them those data before starting them?
That's usually, I mean, it is the entry point. It's kind of the spearhead, if you will, because it's look, I'm not gonna try and sell you a 1, 2, 3 month engagement with no qualification.
Yeah.
It's got to be, look, let's do something quick. Let's do something very affordable,
Mhm.
and let's find a way that it's a good use of your investment, both in time and dollars, because it's the reality is a lot of those things require interaction. They require meetings and coordination and data partnership. So it's really about ensuring that let's do the MVP so that you see this is worth proceeding with. And interestingly, to tie it back into where the product comes in, one of the major things that I wanted to do was automate that as much as possible.
Mhm.
That discovery and assessment portion, because I've seen it be entirely manual, I've seen it be partially automated,
Mhm.
but where in my past life where it often fell down, especially with when you get into again tens to hundreds of thousands of seats in an organization, there's so much data that trying to collect it when they're all using different platforms for endpoint management. They're all using different platforms for asset management. When you're trying to amalgamate that much data and there's that much variance in who's using what, you're trying to create this jigsaw puzzle of every variation of what a customer is using. I can go scan through,
Mhm.
and that's a challenge. That's an investment, but that's one of the things where I I said I want to make that investment. I'm starting with obviously the most common and to build out the easiest kind of MVP to be viable,
Mhm.
but working through all the relevant market players to
Mhm.
say, look, I can automate the discovery of this and we can give you a business case, super quick from an automated deployment to an automated scan to an automated output that's got a qualified data that'll tell you here's is this worth pursuing or not, or how much is worth pursuing, how much is probable or possible here, right?
Mhm. Nice. I like this time frame of basically giving at first so that they actually know what's happening and then go into a bigger or a service for them. So what's the big goals for the business in the next 6 to 12 months? Is there any goals reached that we want to reach or?
Yeah, I mean, it's really getting the product out there. We went to Microsoft had an event hosted in New York a couple months ago. We went down there. That was kind of our first preview
Nice.
to an audience, and it was Experts Live US, and that was really interesting to sit there, talk with other professionals, potential customers as well as other folks
Hmm.
who are industry peers, and get their kind of feedback and see what intrigued them about it, um, where it resonated with them.
Mhm.
And coming out of that, it was okay. The MVP was great. Again, I'm super proud of it, but I have so many more ideas now of the next, version 1.1. So the focus has definitely been that over the past, month or so and going into the end of the year with a big focus on doing a more proper 1.1 go live in January and really looking to preview that with some of our first customers, getting them hands-on access and starting to get that iterative feedback on, is it delivering the value? Can it deliver more? What kind of niche situations do they have where it could be that ongoing consultant in a box at their fingertips for this area? And then, yeah, looking to a year from now, I hope we can say we've got, 5, 10, 20,000 seats onboarded, and it's just continuing to iterate and evolve and be one of those use cases where, look, we took AI, we took it responsibly, we
Mhm.
took it surgically and put it into something where it could really extrapolate that value where it's being fed, but it was intrinsically kind of intertwined with a very human, experience driven rubric and scoring that then converted into something that customers could just ingest and drive value for them.
Hmm. And what's the game plan to get those 100, 200 seats to this platform?
Fortunately, I've got a couple of great friends in great positions at certain organizations that are happy to kind of pilot it
Hmm.
and do that preview with it.
Hmm.
And that'll be the first adoption. And then, having them willing to do that is so massive because then we've got that use case.
Yeah.
Then we can show, hey, look, here's what we discovered. Here's how little time it took to deploy. Here's how little time it took to scan. And here's, one of the big focal points that I love about my narrative with the product is when you bring in a consultancy, they do this assessment and they give you, a piece of paper, a stack of papers, your output, your assessment, and you've got it. And that's great, but that's a point in time.
Mm.
It doesn't show, oh, we started to do some of this work. How are we looking now 3 months later? Right?
Mm.
Because it's very rarely binary where we got a stack of 5 things to do. We did all 5. Done. Right? That's just not how things get funded, how projects get executed, and how initiatives are kind of sequenced in a lot of these organizations. So having this presence ongoing, running time scans, whether it's quarterly, monthly, weekly, even if you're, that agile and changing things, you're getting that trending of how things are evolving.
Mhm.
And the scoring rubric itself being very evolutionary, where as new technologies come into play, you'll see where you might be aging into tech debt with it. So the persistence of the platform integrated with everything else that it's doing is such a key value driver for it to really show where your investments are resonating, right? Are you doing this very spiky and then letting it age down? Are you kind of doing a constant plateau step kind of approach? The analysis of how your investments are impacting your environment and how that's impacting your productivity and your users and your security posture, it's a whole almost like micro ecosystem in and of itself that I'm really excited to see, scale organizations adopting and what they're learning and able to take from it.
Nice. So I have good plans for that, and I hope it's gonna go towards like referrals from what people you know, and then try to get into new clients after that for to get more people. I like the plan. So this is gonna be it for today. I really like your invitation, and I like you as a guest. Good conversation. Is there any place that the people who watch the show can talk with you or be in touch with your business?
LinkedIn's probably the easiest. Look me up, Mark O'Keefe, and or look up Portunous Tech and portunistech.com. Any of which is easy to find you, and would love to hear from folks.
Perfect. Thanks again, Mark.
Thanks, Maxime. Appreciate it.
Thank you.